Hi, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dan Rust, who is the Vice President of Leadership and Organizational Development with us at Infopro Learning. He will be sharing valuable insights on the webinar titled as Your Personal Leadership Brand. The platform that we are using here is MS Teams. In case you have any questions, please raise your hand. We can get you unmuted to ask directly to our thought leader. Please join me in welcoming Dan Rust. Over to you, Dan.
Oh, Somnath. So I've reached a point in my life where I'm being referred to as distinguished, our distinguished speaker. So, okay, I guess I'll just have to embrace that as a
Absolutely, you
descriptor.
should.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We are about to embark on today's webinar, Your Personal Leadership Brand. I am.
I'm sorry, Dan, you are on mute again.
Man, I wonder. Okay, so
Yes, you are
sorry
audible.
about that. As Somnath said, as we move forward, just a bit of etiquette. We aren't going to have any polling activities today. We have a lot of content that we're going to be covering, but certainly you are welcome to, if you have questions or comments, you are welcome to share those in the chat function, and Somnath will be monitoring the chat function, and then we'll flag comments or questions to make sure that I do pay attention. Um, and respond to any questions that you have. Also, if you wish to speak, if you have any commentary that you wish to verbalize, you are absolutely welcome to do so. Just unmute yourself and share whatever it is that you want to say or ask, and then afterwards you'll remute yourself. So I just want to confirm some that everyone does have the ability to unmute themselves. They don't have to uh, be
They
unmuted
have to
by
raise
us.
their hand. They have
Okay.
to raise their hand
Okay.
and can ask the question. Once it is done, we can unmute them
Got it. Okay.
or we can
Great.
mute them.
So I am Dan Rust, author of the book Workplace Poker, which is a guide to navigating one's career and navigating the interpersonal waters of the typical work environment. Uh, HarperCollins was kind enough to publish that book in 2016, and it became a modest bestseller in the career guidance genre. I'm also host of the Leadership Disrupted podcast, and you can find me on LinkedIn if you follow that link that you see on the screen. And my day job is the Vice President of Global Leadership Development for Infopro Learning. And in that role, I have conversations every day with leaders throughout the world. Most of those conversations are virtual, as you see here, and they range broadly in terms of topics. We talk about issues related to emerging leaders or early career leaders, mid-career professionals, and what they can do to boost their career trajectories. We talk about senior and executive leadership development. So it's the best part of my job where I just get to talk to people every single day about what's happening with leaders and leadership development in their world. Um, the book Workplace Poker, as I said, I'm mentioning it here because it is a source for today's um, uh, webinar. It's one of the sources for today's webinar. So this book, and the tagline kind of says it: "Are you playing the game or just getting played?" So this book was designed to be an ethical and authentic guide to navigating interpersonal challenges in politics in the workplace, and that is related to and part of one's personal brand. So we are going to be referencing some elements that come from that book. And also within the course library, Infopro Learning has over 60 leadership development programs. One of those programs is called Your Personal Leadership Brand. So I'm going to be sampling from some of the content from that program as well. So with that as an overall introduction, let's go ahead and get started. And first of all, the topic of personal branding, individual professional branding, personal marketing, whatever phrase you might want to use, It's been a huge topic for really decades. There are dozens of books that have been written on the subject, and and they all have value. They all have their own unique point of view, their own unique branding for the books themselves. There are some commonalities between these books or amongst these books, and what I don't want to do is spend a lot of time today going through things that have already been covered by 5 or 10 books. But there are a couple of as I and I've read, I would say, the majority of these books, and the as I think about what they have in common, there are a few key thoughts that are common to most of them, and I think I'll share those. But I will also say, um, at the end of this, I'm going to have Somnath follow up with everyone who's attended this program, and I'll send my show notes. So in my show notes that I use to actually move forward with this presentation, I've got details on all of the commonalities. Everything that you hear from me is going to be in the show notes, so you don't have to take notes. You don't have to worry about not being able to retain anything that we share here. But as I look at the commonalities amongst these books, there are a couple of things that do pop out in my mind, and one of them is the importance of networking and relationship building strategically within the group and the organization that you work within. Many of us, without necessarily intending to, particularly if we're working in a remote environment, networking was always a challenge, even when we all worked in office locations where we were, surrounded by the people that we are in business with. Now that many of us are working in remote environments, not all of us, but being strategic about your networking, reaching out and having a plan to build a network throughout the organization, throughout the influence channels within the organization. This is something that many of these books do mention. So I'm not going to go through like the specific recommendations. I would say pick up any of these, including Workplace Poker, and you'll get some good guidance on how to expand your network. But networking is a commonality throughout them. And also, what's common amongst all of these is the consciousness of your personal branding, not just letting what happens happens. Hey, the way you like to dress is the way you dress. The way you like to show up in virtual meetings is the way that you show up. The way you like to attend live meetings is the way you attend. What I've seen as a commonality amongst all of these is the directive or the guidance to at least be open to rethinking everything. At least rethink. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to change everything, but at least you have some consciousness of thought regarding how do I interact with others? What is my personal professional brand? How do people think of me? How do people perceive me? Um, am I the person in meetings who regularly creates value or shares value? And sharing value in meetings is not the same as speaking up in meetings. So it's not just about always having a voice or always saying something, but what is my personal brand, and where do I want my personal brand to be, and what are the gaps, and how do I fill those gaps? How do I address those gaps? Again, those are some of the common themes amongst these various books. So all of them are recommended. And when you get my show notes, you'll see some of the actual commonalities that we address or that are addressed throughout these books. So let's talk a moment, though, about how the world has changed since these books were written. Because most of these books, in fact, I think all of them, are what I would call pre-pandemic books. And we work in a world today that is, in many ways, it looks somewhat like our pre-pandemic work. But the reality is, information flows so much more massively today than it did 5 or 10 years ago. The reality is that we are all with our smartphones, with 724 access to social media, entertainment media, business media, our work media and work information, news media, and all of it intermixed. And sometimes we don't know which is which. Sometimes what appears to be social media is actually commercial media. Sometimes what appears to be news media is actually commercial media. And we've entered what many of us are starting to perceive as a post-truth world, because we don't necessarily always know what is the truth, what is real, what's real reality. It's as if we're all living in a reality show and we all see things from different points of view based upon what's being fed to us. And so, I mean, you may have experienced this. Have you ever had a colleague or someone that you used to work with, and then you go to their LinkedIn profile and you read for their LinkedIn profile, and it's pretty darn impressive. Their photo looks better. You, because you know them, you know their photo really accentuates their positive qualities, and so the photo makes them look fantastic. Their bio makes them look fantastic. Their responsibilities that they've listed, man, you say that's amazing, but not necessarily connected to reality. And yet that's the reality that's being served up to the rest of the world that doesn't actually know this particular person or this particular individual. And that's just one aspect of it. We are living in a world where we are served so much information and misinformation that, again, some people are calling it a post-truth world. So how do you brand yourself in a post-truth world? I'm not going to recommend that you fake it. I'm not going to recommend that you say things that aren't true. But even if you are being totally authentic, it's important that you carefully craft and curate your messaging, because you're in your own way competing with both reality and non-reality. And so whether you're applying for a job or applying for a promotion or just trying to maximize how you are perceived on LinkedIn, it's important that you maximize that. It's important that you accentuate your positive qualities, and so that you put some serious thought into every aspect. Again, not just of your LinkedIn profile, but your LinkedIn profile is one great example. But in this post-truth world where many of us are experiencing cognitive overload, it's important that you are thoughtful about your communication, your personal branding communication. Um, Whenever I see someone, and again, I'm going to reference LinkedIn several times throughout this, just because LinkedIn is common to many of us, if not all of us. Um, what I love reading is a really tight one paragraph bio on LinkedIn that's clearly well written, that's clearly human, has a human element to it. If it can be a little clever and a little humorous, that's even better. But in the world we exist in today, it's important that we are all very disciplined about the amount of information we're expecting people to read. I ask myself consistently, what am I what am I asking in terms of someone's cognitive load? How much effort am I asking them to take to read this email, to read this LinkedIn post, to read this bio or description, or to read this whatever? If I am overloading them cognitively and I'm expecting them to engage and spend a lot of time with something, it had better be worth the effort. So usually you're going to be better off if you are very disciplined in terms of squeezing down what you're saying. You can build a lot of value into a few words if you really focus on losing the fluff. What's also important in this world where everyone is just exposed to so much information, when you do write a commentary on LinkedIn or some other social media, whether it's Instagram or X/Twitter or whatever it might be, that your commentary is insightful, that it has something to say, that it's not just an echo of someone else's commentary. But the big point here is that in this world where everyone's overwhelmed, think through, how am I going to cut through all the noise? How am I going to cut through all of this and make sure that what I present is crisp? The energy that I bring to a meeting grabs attention. The insight that I bring, whether it's to a meeting, maybe it's insight within the questions that I ask, maybe it's insight with the information that I share. Had a really interesting thing happen um, about a month ago. I was in a live meeting. So most of my life is spent virtually, but I happened to be in a live meeting with about 20 people, and there was some debate happening about a particular issue, and whatever the issue is doesn't really matter. Um, lots of different discussion, lots of I'll call it debate, um, and it seemed to be going nowhere for about 15 minutes. And then one of the participants stood up, went to the whiteboard marker. He grabbed a marker pen and he described his point of view, but he illustrated it with a very brief, simple illustration. And in that moment, all of the 20 people in the room, in that moment, everyone focused on this person. He had stood up. He had gone to the marker board. He had the marker, almost like having the sword. He had the marker, and then he clearly thought this through because this simple diagram that he drew um, was actually quite insightful. And suddenly, he brought everyone closer to his point of view. And I share that only because, in terms of personal branding, that's the one moment everyone from that meeting will remember. And the thought that he put into it was really clear and crisp. So suddenly all of the noise stopped for a moment and we paid attention to his particular message. So I'm only sharing that because if you can stay sensitive to this new world that we're all living in, where time is so time is probably the most valuable commodity. Attention is the most valuable commodity, and in a post-truth world, trust is a very valuable commodity. So if you can develop a reputation where people learn that they can trust your point of view, they can trust your insights, they can trust that an article or something else that you post or something that you say has value, the next time you're in a meeting and you speak up, people will quiet down because they've learned that they can trust you. So, in this world, because trust is at risk, because we've been so over inundated with people's reality that isn't necessarily real. This is meant as a joke. Authenticity is the main thing, and if you can fake that, you've got it made. This is a joke that goes back to, I forget who was the comedian that actually said it, but the point is, authenticity is the main thing. Authenticity is important, and so as you are developing a personal and professional brand in your workplace, make sure that that brand authentically reflects you and who you are. And that requires thought, that requires attention. Um, and I don't want to pretend that there isn't a bit of theater in personal branding. There is. We are all, every day, we are all putting on, to some degree, a show. I'm putting on a show right now. I'm putting on a show with the lighting, the background, the shirt that I'm wearing, my personal grooming, the energy that I bring to this webinar, even my sound quality that I bring to this webinar. There's a lot of effort to put on a show, but it's not just this webinar. Every time you show up at a meeting, every time you have a one-on-one interaction, there is a bit of theater to personal and professional branding. And I think it's important that we accept that there is a bit of theater and ask yourself, what kind of show am I putting on? What parts of the show do people remember? What parts of the show create value for others? And um, and if you can accept that it is about authenticity, but it's still also about the show. It's about the authentic show that you're bringing to the party. I have experienced situations where I have colleagues who do great work and who think that doing great work is really all they need to do. That if I just keep my head down and I just do great work, the great work will speak for itself. But we do live in a world right now where great work doesn't always speak for itself. It's important to do great work. It's important to be competent. It's important to do the job well, but it's generally not enough. You have to do the job well, and that doing the job well becomes part of your personal brand. But in addition, you have to make sure that the show that you're putting on is actually accentuating all of that great work that you're doing. So I'm going to pause, and just in case there might be any questions or comments, And also, it gives me a moment to take a sip of coffee. If no questions or comments, let's talk about empty suits. What I mean by the term empty suit is someone who has a position. Oh, I see the comment from Sandra Guzman. People can tell when you are genuine and also when you are not. I think being authentic helps you in the long run. Absolutely. Now, the other part of that is people won't always tell you that they're perceiving you as being inauthentic. They will oftentimes they'll figure out that you're doing a tap dance. They'll figure out that you really are, what's the phrase from Texas, all hat and no cattle. They'll figure that out, but they won't say it to you. And you may think, hey, I'm doing great because I'm putting on a show and everyone seems to be buying it. It's important that your show is, in fact, authentic. And so uh, when when a leader or really anyone is perceived as an empty suit, usually it's someone who overly relies on buzzwords, corporate speak. They overly rely on their position. You know, as I am in this position, I have this title. Um, Sometimes it's people who overly focus on personal grooming, personal style, personal image over results. And people are, of course, paying attention to everything that you do in the workplace. They're paying attention not just to how you look, but the results that you're delivering. They're paying attention to who you work with and how you work with others. Your entire your entire approach to working collaboratively with others is also part of your professional brand and your reputation for either working well with others or not working well with others, or your reputation for taking the credit of others. That's a reputation that will make its way around, and people will figure out, okay, this is someone who actually does a great job of tooting his own horn or her own horn and takes the credit of others, as opposed to being somebody who gives the credit to others. Um, I think this is again Sandra who says, I've met my share of empty suits, and they are not the people that motivate me or others the most. The lesson is don't be an empty suit. Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can avoid being an empty suit. And a big part of that is what I call functional competence. How good are you at the job that you are expected to do? Um, it's not, you're not generally paid just for turning screws. You're paid for knowing which screws need to be turned and in what way they need to be turned. The ability to do the job that you are responsible or accountable for doing, and to doing it in a not just a good way, not just an acceptable way, but in an extraordinarily good way. That is the bedrock of your personal brand. That is the bedrock of your credibility. And I think that if I can talk just a bit about mid-career and senior leaders, there are some mid-career and senior leaders who were doing great in terms of doing their job functionally in their early years of their career. And they got a lot of traction, they got a lot of momentum, and their career grew. But now the world as it is changing, if you are a mid-career or a senior leader and your communication approach hasn't evolved as the world has evolved, if your leveraging of technology hasn't evolved as the world has evolved. um, I do a little bit of individual executive coaching, and one of the first things we talk about is how have you evolved as a leader? Your communication, your leveraging of technology, your approach to the people that you work with, your emotional intelligence, your social intelligence. The world has changed. So I ask leaders, how have you changed? And generally speaking, the answer is not so much. And then we have some tough conversations about how should you evolve? How do you need to evolve? If you're going to be delivering as much value in 3 years as you were delivering 3 years ago, or in 5 years or 10 years as you were 5 or 10 years ago, it's going to require an evolution on your part. Um, in a world of misinformation, in a world of bad data, proven expertise wins the game. Being able to develop a reputation for delivering results, it springs from competence. And so I would just ask you to ask yourself, um, in the wee hours when you're doing deep self-reflection, asking yourself, where do I really need to sharpen my own saw? Where do I really need to work on my own competence? Each of us has that area or has those areas. Every one of us does. I would imagine for some of you, you may have been reading about and thinking about AI, and unless AI comes right at you and there's like an immediate in your face issue where you have to learn more about how AI works, how artificial intelligence impacts your specific job, you may not have gone as deep with AI as you probably should. It's just one area where I think many of us can spend some significant time deep diving, and it will help us with our jobs today, but also help us with our personal branding. And we'll talk about that a little bit more toward the end. Um, there is, there's a phrase, fake it until you make it. And fake it until you make it. If we were operating in the 80s or the 90s, I would have said, yes, fake it till you make it, and then you'll eventually figure it out. And that's now it's still an okay philosophy, as long as you fake it while building the actual capability, because there's less and less patience, less and less time for those who are faking it in order to get the job, get the credibility, get the position, get the promotion, get the whatever. I do think that at the end of the day, in today's world, reality and competency wins out. Um, and by the time you make it, you need to be it. It's not just fake it until you make it. Fake it until you are it, and then you can eventually be it, and then you can eventually make it. I've worked with too many leaders at every level who their suits are not as full as they think they are. So the other thing to remember as a leader is, as you gain power over others, even if you're just a frontline supervisor over a team of 7 people, the fact that you have a bit of power over them puts you into a bit of a little bubble. And so the feedback that you get from them isn't always going to be as authentic as you think that it might be, because you have power over them. You have power over their performance reviews. You have power over their career, over their position. And that's just leading a small team. As you move up the corporate hierarchy, that bubble gets bigger and thicker, to the point where once you are the head of a division or the CEO of a business, people are very cautious about what they say to you. You tell a joke and everybody laughs. Now, if you tell a joke in front of a group of people and you're the CEO and everyone laughs, if you think that means you're funny, you don't understand the nature of the bubble, because that doesn't mean you're funny. All it means is you have power over them, so they're feeding you what it is that you want to hear. If you share an idea or you say to them, "This is our new strategy for 2025 going forward," and the audience says, "That is so amazingly insightful. That's just incredible." If you believe that comment means that you are in fact insightful or that your strategy is incredible, you again don't understand the nature of the bubble. So the challenge with leaders, as you move up the hierarchy and this bubble expands and gets thicker, you can no longer count on the feedback of others to drive your growth. So you have to be hard on yourself. You have to be the person who says, okay, yeah, everyone says that there was a great presentation. What do I think? What do I think? Maybe I have to take a look at a video of my presentation and be hard on myself. I'm the expert on me. You are the expert on you, particularly as you move up the corporate hierarchy. So the next topic is what I call skill stacking. You may have heard of this as a topic before. Skill stacking basically means as you progress through your career, you acquire more and more and more skills. And some of the skills are directly relevant to your job at the time. Other skills you may acquire, I'll take it to an extreme. Sometimes you may acquire skills on the side. You may learn to play the guitar. You may learn a new language. You may learn woodworking or whatever it is. But those skills are still part of your skill stack as your life progresses. And one of our recommendations in terms of personal leadership branding is that you consciously think through, how do I need to expand my skill stack? What do I need to add in terms of my skill stack? And when I'm talking to younger uh, employees in particular, and they're thinking about skills to add to their skill stack, I do have some unpopular thoughts. The I would say the least popular thought that I share with them is, you know, you should really take a year or two and take a sales position. Oh, I hate sales. I'm not in sales. No, I don't want to do sales. And I say to them, I got to tell you, it may not be your career path, it may not be your ultimate goal, but what you will learn in a sales role, particularly if you can drive yourself to be successful in that sales role for 2 or 3 years, um, it will serve you well throughout the rest of your career, because you will be forced to acquire a whole set of skills that come along with that sales role. So I can't force it on anyone, but I highly recommend, if you are, particularly in your younger years, the early stages of your career, and you have an opportunity to take on a sales role, I would take that opportunity. It's not a guarantee of success. It's not a guarantee of anything, but it's a set of skills that you will be forced to learn that will serve you long term for sure. Um, and I would, in the commentary, if there are any of you who have joined, who took on a sales role early in your career, and you can validate that, even though you may have moved on beyond, direct selling at this point, that it actually served you quite well. I would love to see that commentary coming forward. And if I don't see it, then I'll just assume you're all thinking, oh my God, never. No, 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 no. I don't ever want to be a salesperson. I get it. I get the pain. I get the pain for people who are uh, maybe not naturally built to sell. The challenge, though, is some of those people actually make great salespeople. I I love working with someone who is very thoughtful, maybe even a little introverted, maybe more data oriented, who isn't all flash in the pan. Those people can make great salespeople, even if they ultimately move on. So just think about your skill stack. Think about what you might consciously want to add to your skill stack. Um, think about specifically, when we're dealing with competency, we're building competencies. We're helping you over time become more and more and more credible and competent. When I'm working with, I lead a team of researchers, developers, and instructional designers who focus on leadership development programs. They have a wide range of competencies, but the fact that I in my past have built e-learning courses, the fact that I in my past have created virtual instructor-led courses, I've created on-site instructor-led courses, the fact that in my past I have been a facilitator and a trainer, the fact that I have all of those experiences absolutely adds to my skill stack when I'm engaging with them. It adds to my credibility. It adds to my effectiveness as a leader with the team. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen what happens when a leader comes in who does not have that functional skill stack, and how ultimately it impacts their ability to lead, and it impacts their brand as well. So um, it's important in personal branding to stand out, to be uniquely capable, to have a unique set of skills, maybe more skills or different skills or various skills that are unique to you. But we also need to be conscious of what I call the red crow effect. I'm going to pause for a moment. I see Sandra has made another comment. What is the top skill that they would get taking a sales role? I'm guessing communication, but not sure. Uh, uh, but not sure because I never did sales. So it could be, and this is probably tracking with communication. I'll tell you what I learned was the value of asking great, intelligent questions. Now, all the other things, presentation skills, communication in general, but the big thing that I took away was ask insightful questions that help you peel the layers away in terms of what's really going on with that person. That alone has served me hugely. Uh, Valentina says, 100%. I started in sales and moved to L&D. The true understanding of everything a salesperson needs to do to succeed has been a great resource for my career. Um, Now, asking intelligent, insightful questions is its own skill set. It requires, oh man, the biggest challenge for me is truly listening. You hear the term active listening. Yes, listening actively, but listening both for what's being said and then what's not being said under the surface and what might be happening behind the scene, and then thinking of questions that you want to ask to peel those layers away. It's a true skill set. Great interviewers that you see on television, oftentimes they will take a particular topic. They're interviewing a celebrity or someone. They don't just ask one question. They'll ask a question. The celebrity or whoever they're interviewing will give an answer. They'll pick up on something that person said, and they'll ask a follow-up question that leverages something that person said, and then they'll listen to the response and ask another follow-up question, almost like peeling the leaves off of a branch. So they take that branch all the way down to peel off all of the leaves, but by asking those follow-up questions, they pull the other party into the conversation. They make it clear that they're actively listening to that person, and it's a very, or at least it was for me, a difficult skill set to learn, but it has served me really well. So, what do I mean by the red crow? Oh, uh, Kiona, sales makes you fearless. You gotta love that. It is true. Um, you 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 learn to take rejection. You learn to take people who don't understand you. You learn to not take it personally. Absolutely. So again, if I was giving a young career person advice, in fact, I would say the more you resist it, maybe the more you would benefit from it. Maybe it doesn't have to be 3 years, um, but it but generally, I find doing it for 3 years is when you really develop, all of the deep skills. So, what do I mean by the red crow effect? What I mean by that is um, they've done studies that show that if you take a flock of birds and there's a one bird that's noticeably different. In fact, there was an experiment with a canary with a group of canaries, and they put just a red dot on one of the canaries, and that canary was either ostracized by the others or was attacked by the others. Uh, so what I mean by the red crow effect is you want to be different, but not too different. You want to be unique, but not so unique that you stick out too much. And that's something you're going to have to gauge for yourself. But if you're too unique or you stick out too much, let's say you're doing a great job and you're getting lots of accolades and rewards because you are doing a great job. You're doing whatever your job is. You've been just knocking it out of the park, and suddenly your reports are crisper and more insightful than anybody else's. Your deliverables are better than anybody else's. You're producing results that the organization has never seen before. And you start getting accolades and rewards and recognition, recognizing at some point you may be developing into a red crow, meaning you might be becoming too different. I'm just saying that recognizing that in yourself and then modifying so that you start to take some of that recognition that you're getting and give it to others. Hey, I really appreciate that recognition. By the way, these three people really helped me with the process, or these three, I really built this on the shoulders of this particular team. I'm not saying you always have to do that because sometimes it's important to take credit, but sometimes it's also important to give credit and to spread the credit around. And then also just in terms of your again, whatever makes you unique, you want to accentuate that. You want to be noticeable when you show up in a meeting, whether it's how you are dressed, how you act, the energy that you bring, the mindset that you bring. Even I will tell you, this example goes back. This goes back 20 years. I hate to admit it, but it goes back 20 years. Um, I used to attend a weekly meeting for that was being delivered by the CEO of the organization I was working for at the time, and I was of a group of about 50 people who would attend this weekly. It was basically his weekly update. We were going through a major change process, and so for once a week for a period of about 4 months, we all got together in a room, and it was after the third or fourth of those meetings the CEO um, sought me out, and he just said, "Hey, Dan, I want you to know I really do appreciate your engagement in the meeting." He said, "When I look out at the crowd and as I'm sharing information, mostly what I'm getting are kind of flat stares. People are." He said, "I know people are worried. They're wondering how this is impacting their world." And he said, "I can always count on you. You're sitting there, but you're nodding. I can see you nodding. I can see you tracking with what I'm saying. Um, you ask really good questions. So when I say to the group, does anybody have any questions? He said, I know you're going to probably raise your hand and ask a question. And usually it's a really good question that helps me accentuate something, or it's a question that other people are thinking, but they're not comfortable saying." And he said, it's really helpful for me as I'm staring out at a sea of 50 people to look and see there you are nodding and smiling and tracking with my thought process. And what I realized in that moment was that, okay, so how I'm showing up for his meeting is part of the personal branding. It wasn't intentional, but it was part of the personal branding. So back to the red crow effect. Be unique, be noticeable, but recognize when maybe you've crossed the line and now you're a little too noticeable, too recognized, or too unique. Again, this is your personal call. You've got to decide um, when you've passed over to become a red crow. One of the greatest opportunities to create value for your organization, for your team, for the people around you, is within your own thought process. When we started this webinar, I showed you a bunch of books. One of the things none of them addresses is how the greatest value that you create can come from your mind, the greatest uniqueness that you can create. But this is hard work. This is not as simple as, oh, well, I just have an instinctive, different way of thinking about this. This is hard work. But I would ask you, or I would suggest that if you think about your thinking. Um, if you spend time reading more than others, studying more than others, thinking more than others about whatever the topic is, listening to podcasts more than others, being exposed to more information than others on whatever topic is relevant to you and your professional development, you and your career, and if you would spend time going outside of your existing comfort zone, because we all tend to live in a bit of an information bubble. You know that AI does this. You know that algorithms do this. They tend to feed you more of what you have been already exposed to. They tend to feed you more of what you've shown interest in, which is fine to a certain degree. But then at a certain point, they're only feeding you what you want to hear. So whether the topic is financially related, whether the topic is related to leading people, whatever the topic might be, work hard to think beyond just what the algorithm is feeding to you. And so when you gain a reputation for being someone who thinks a little more deeply, asks questions a little more insightfully, creates value based upon your thinking, that to me is the most effective personal branding. That's personal branding that can't be taken away from you. That's personal branding that is inherently authentic. And so again, the answer is going to be different for every one of you. Each of you is in your own different career situation, but I would ask you to think about your thinking and think about how you can bring more depth to your thinking. Also, think about your interactions with your colleagues and the people that you are surrounded with. I have worked for people who are so incredibly competent and bright and articulate, but also challenging to work with because they're so self-serious. They're so just, I'll say abrasive. They're so abrasive. Um, if you think about bringing humor to your personal professional brand, bring a lightheartedness of spirit, being willing to poke fun at yourself and your own challenges. We all love an incredibly competent person who doesn't take themselves so seriously. We love someone who is, we just know they are so great at their job, but they're also fun to work with. They're a joy to work with. There is no reason it has to be uh, difficult. We all know people who have gravitas, who we know you are a serious thinker, you're a serious contributor, you create serious value for the business, and it turns out you're lighthearted, you're fun, you can be joyous. Now, humor, is a touchy subject. You have to be thoughtful about humor. Your humor can't be. It's not about telling jokes. It's not about making fun of others. If there were any two rules to humor in the workplace, I guess those rules might be make fun of yourself, but never make fun of anybody else. But you can call yourself out. I I think one of the reasons I gravitated toward a career in training is someone did say to me once, Dan, you're one of those guys, you can see a single bullet point on a PowerPoint slide and you can talk for 5 minutes. You can over verbalize a set of PowerPoint slides or a set of bullet points on a PowerPoint slide like nobody I've ever seen before. So, essentially, I share that with you because, well, A, it's true, and B, it's just lighthearted. It's just meant to be humorous. So, rule number one: don't make fun of others, but feel comfortable making fun of yourself. And rule number two is not really coming back to me right now, but there is a second rule, and I know it's in my show notes. I just don't want to. I don't want to scan for it, but so when you get the show notes, go to rule number two and try follow both of those rules. So now there's going to be a bit of a conflict here because humor, lightheartedness is important, but what's also important is gravitas. What's also important is seriousness. What's also important is, it's not just having fun. It's not just being the life of the party. There is this balance between being a serious player who's also easy to work with, being a serious player who can make light of situations, but gravitas. And as you can imagine, all of these recommendations kind of come, they work together. So developing greater competency, working on the insightfulness of your thinking, those things do build your gravitas. You may be in a meeting and you may be the one person who maintains their composure, who asks thoughtful, insightful questions, that person who can own the room without necessarily even a single sentence being said. Gravitas, I mean, we all know it when we see it. It's kind of like describing art. It's hard to define great art, but you know great art when you see it. Or uh, the late Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, I think he was quoted as saying, "Hey, I don't know how to define pornography, but I know it when I see it." The same is true with pornography, with gravitas. It's hard to define, but we know it when we see it. Gravitas can be that quiet person who's just thinking and taking notes as we're discussing, and then he or she might raise their hand and ask a question or make a comment, but they have a certain seriousness to them. But where I see, if you can manage this unique alchemy of lighthearted humor and gravitas, to me, those people are so rare. That's a great professional brand in terms of the way people experience you. And I think you will be well served by over time. Now, none of these changes, if any of these are areas where you feel you have room for development, I would just say don't expect life to change overnight. Don't expect you to change overnight. But if you give yourself kind of a vision of of um, of being, a little more serious and a little more lighthearted at the same time, a little more competent and a little more lighthearted at the same time, that will serve you well in terms of your personal brand as others experience you in the workplace. So you can control what people focus on. When you think about your LinkedIn profile, if you go to anyone's LinkedIn profile that's been well curated, what essentially happens with a LinkedIn profile is you decide, okay, I have this world of experience, I have this world of There's a lifetime of things that I could share. What I'm going to do is curate content to my LinkedIn profile that will focus people's attention. So um, when you think about in your workplace, as you're talking to people, the stories that you tell about yourself, the stories that you tell about your background, the stories that you tell about where you went to school. There was a time when I was self-conscious about where I went to college because I didn't go to a fancy schmancy, big Ivy League college, but I was working in an environment with a lot of people who had, very much gone to those kinds of schools. And my first formal education was a military school. I went to the U.S. Navy Nuclear Power Academy, and I was very self-conscious about that because it wasn't a fancy schmancy Ivy League college. So I tended to not discuss that at all, and it became awkward when others were discussing, hey, where did you go to school, what fraternity did you belong to, what sorority did you belong to. What I learned over time is that I could curate which parts of my formal education were most relevant, most impressive to others, and so when I share with others bits and pieces of my background, when I share stories of my personal life, when I share bits and pieces of me, I don't just share everything. I curate that content because I'm focusing their attention on just particular parts of my background, my experience. My LinkedIn profile is very curated. So when you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see it's all true, it's all authentic, but it is curated to give a particular impression. And I think that's what we all have to do in this world of information overwhelm. We have to be curators of our image out into the world. Now, the way you curate LinkedIn might be different slightly than the way you curate your Facebook feed or the way you curate Instagram. But I have to say, even our truly social media, if we're going to focus on our professional branding, um, it's all professional. People will visit your Facebook page. They will visit your Instagram feed. They will visit your Twitter X. They will visit Blue Sky. They will, if they're interested in you, they will visit at times all of these things. So you can't be, well, I'm this over here. But now if you see me on Blue Sky or if you see me on Twitter, now I'm suddenly something different or something very opinionated or something very whatever. Just know the eyes are always on you, or they're going to be on you everywhere. And this does kind of bring up the topic of sharing controversial or political opinions and points of view. I would never say to anybody, don't don't share your political view on Instagram or Twitter or Blue Sky. I might say on LinkedIn because LinkedIn tends to be very professional. Although lately I'm seeing more posts that have a bit of a political bent. I'm still not totally sure about that. I think most people they join LinkedIn as as an extension of the office, and so I wouldn't expect you to come to the office with a banner that's pro or anti anything. Um, so I guess that's how I would think about that. But when it comes to Facebook, Twitter, X, etc., Blue Sky, etc., um, I would never say don't be opinionated, don't share your opinions, but think about how you thoughtfully share your opinions without creating abrasion for people, because we can respectfully disagree. We can respectfully and thoughtfully and insightfully share thoughts or opinions that others might not exactly disagree with. For me, um, the best comment I can ever get is when someone says, well, I don't really see it this way, but I really appreciate your thought process. That to me is a great thing. That says, okay, we have an area of disagreement, but they appreciate how I'm thinking about my particular point of view. Um, we're almost at the end time, and I just want to talk just a bit about how you invest your time and money in your own personal branding efforts. You can, if you get really serious about professional branding, you can spend a fair amount of money. There are lots of consultants who will take your money, they will take your time, they will give you lots of advice. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I would say a good place to start is with the DIY, the do it yourself easy stuff. I wouldn't start with a podcast. Podcast requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, may even require a bit of money on your part. I wouldn't start with a podcast. I would start with something like your LinkedIn profile, and not necessarily hiring a consultant to work on your LinkedIn profile. Go to, do a tour of 20 other LinkedIn profiles that you really like and just notice how they brand themselves, whether they did it consciously or it was just in their innate nature. But starting with the easy stuff in terms of how you can promote yourself, promote your viewpoint, promote your way of thinking, promote your way of being. And I will tell you, it doesn't, you may be the lowest of the lowest level of employees. You may be at the absolute bottom of the corporate hierarchy rung. You can still help yourself by reaching out and connecting with others on LinkedIn, others in your industry, others within your company, and then posting your own thoughts and also reacting to the thoughts of others. You can absolutely, if you feel like, well, no, I don't have anything of value to say yet. I'm just going to watch and listen, and I might like a few things. I would say if you like someone else's comment or like someone else's post, add a little comment about why you like it. Just one or two sentences, as opposed to just clicking on the like button. Make a bit of a comment. That again, it's a little thing, but over time, your point of view will be appreciated by others, and it'll start to fill out what your actual personal brand is. Final point, and then we are definitely going to wrap up, and that is leveraging AI. So using tools like ChatGPT, Claude, or others. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of potential tools. It makes it easier to post commentary and articles. It makes it easier to write, I'm going to say, quote unquote, insightful commentary. Um, be very cautious in the way that you leverage AI. Make sure that you think of AI as your own personal intern who's doing phase one of whatever you're writing, because whatever AI produces for you, make sure that you screen it, uh, make sure that what you send out to the world reflects you. And so that, it can help you along if you make sure that what you input into AI has a big part of your point of view, a big part of your unique language. But now, once it comes back, I would never, ever post to somebody just a flat AI written version of anything. I would always massage it to make it me, to make it mine. I had an experience where someone sent me a performance review that they had written. They told me they had written it for someone else, for one of my colleagues. So as part of the 360 feedback process, this person sent me like a page and a half of feedback on this person. And the person who sent it to me said, "Hey, I just want you to review this and tell me if this reflects your working relationship with that person." And I read it, and number one, I recognized it instantly as an AI generated thing. I think they probably put in a lot of commentary that they'd received from others, and then they asked AI to generate a performance review. It instantly felt AI generated. And then there was one particular paragraph that seemed really off. That just is not right. And so I replied back with a human written paragraph, my experience of that person. I thought at the very least he deserved a human response. So I to the person who was asking for my feedback, I sent them a human response paragraph. But then I also said that paragraph's problematic. I don't see it in that person. That doesn't seem to reflect my reality. And she, to her credit, she reached back and she said, I think what happened, because I was using AI to curate content, to curate comments, and I think AI over indexed on something that someone had said about that particular characteristic. And she said, so thank you. I'm gonna eliminate that. So at least she was open to or open about her use of AI. I would just say be cautious about leveraging AI. Make sure that it truly reflects you. We're right at the end of the time. Samnath is going to follow up and provide the show notes to all of you who attended. So I know we've gone 100 miles an hour, carried a lot, covered a lot of information in a short period of time. I'll be sending it out to you. And perhaps at some point we'll see you or talk to you in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. Please take care.